Oh, there's a person on stage. Thank you. I'm getting compliments already. I've only just arrived. It's my glasses, by the way, being excellent, not the rest of me. Welcome. My name's Louise. I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the committee that organised tonight. It's lovely to see you all. Welcome as well if you are on the live stream, and I can't see you. It's lovely to know that you are there. We do have quite a few, I believe, on the live stream, having little discussion groups and stuff, so that's really good to know that that's going on. During this evening, we hope that you will be caused to think and that you may have questions. If that does happen, you will need a number that is about to come up on the screen. So please do take a note of that number so that when something comes to mind, you can text it in. You can text in at any time, and we'll pick it up, and we have some time for Q&A at the end. So grab that number now, take a photo, whatever it is that helps you remember that number. And the same goes for the live stream. Of course, you can text from wherever you are, and that'll work. You're aware of the title of the event, I'm sure. You all booked tickets or registered for the live stream. We're talking about why climate change matters. We're talking about that for everybody, but also from a Christian perspective. And we hope that whatever angle you are already coming from, that will be of interest to you to kind of think about how we might view the relationship between those two things, how our faith might influence our attitude towards the climate and our environment. And if you, whatever perspective you have, that would be great fuel for your questions and comments. So do use that as well. We'll be really interested to hear from you. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for the evening. This is Dr. Ruth Valerio. She is an environmentalist, theologian, social activist, and author. Now, that sounds like a lot of things. It's very difficult to believe that that is all wrapped up in one human being, but it is. And she is here with us, so it's a great privilege. She cares really deeply about justice and about the planet, the environment that we live in. And she's written about that a lot, which she'll also tell us about. So it's really, really good to have Ruth with us. She's also, I have to give her a title, the Global Advocacy and Influencing Director at Tier Fund. So before I hand over to Ruth, do remember that you have that text number for your questions, and you can text those in at any time. All yours, Ruth.
Brilliant. Louise, thank you ever so much. Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I think you're very sensible to do that at the beginning, just in case you feel you don't want to do that at the end. So it's really lovely to be here with you this evening and to be up joining you. It is up for me. I come from the south of England, from Chichester, which is just a few miles from the coast. So I know this isn't all the way up, but for me it's very definitely up. So it is really lovely to be up with you, and thank you for giving of your evening to come and to join with a bunch of other folks, both here in person, and as Louise said, we've actually got lots of people, more people than are here in person, more people online. So welcome to you too, and thank you for joining us this evening. And just to say to those of you who are online, really want you to feel welcomed and a part of what's happening here. So when there are discussion questions and things, please feel free to put things in the chat, in the Zoom chat, the YouTube chat, and then we can include you as well. So you are very much a part of this evening. So it's great that we are here together to think about this really important topic of why climate change matters. And I actually want to ask you to begin by doing some thinking and to start by doing some dreaming and to begin to build a bit of a sense of vision. What would your dream world, your dream society look like? If you could imagine anything, if you could dream, what dream would you build? What would your vision be? Now, I imagine that it would probably have some big headline topics of an end of world hunger and no more climate change and so on. Okay, we're going to take those as read. If those are what your dream society might be made of, and other things, I'm sure, what would it actually look like? So really practically in the detail, what might you be doing? What might your neighbour be doing? What would your street look like? What would your home look like? What would your place of work or your uni, your city, your neighbourhood, what would it look like physically? What would be happening there? What kind of activities would be taking place? I want to give you a few minutes around your tables to do that dreaming. What kind of a society would you like to see, and what would be happening in it? Over to you. And for those of you who are online, go ahead and dream as well, and put some things in the chat, and then we can pick up on that as well. So, over to you for some dreaming. Great. I'm going to ask you to start to draw your discussions to a close and look this way. I've been hearing little snippets of things coming through and would love to hear more of what you've been sharing. Louise has got a microphone. It's not to be off-putting, it's just to help those who are watching online, so don't be put off by that. But would be great to hear, what are the kind of things you've been dreaming about? What kind of a world, of a society do you want to see, and what would it look like?
1 second.
A gentleman was talking about transport, about free transport or not needing it, and to be able to have more public transport available and everything. And then we're also talking about growing locally more sourceable things and food, knowing about it as well.
Lovely. So some good themes around transport, thinking about how we get around. We would get around in ways that didn't do lots of damage either to the natural world or to ourselves, to our lungs and to other aspects of us. And thinking about our food, that our food would be fresh and healthy, and I can't remember what else came through, but that was the kind of gist, wasn't it? Thank you. Brilliant. Other comments?
Please don't be intimidated by my microphone.
Come on over to the middle, Louise, and then you can...
We're friendly, honest. Amazing.
Well, sorry. We just mentioned about like having more open spaces and just have a general sense of safety. You hear about it back in the day that it was safe for them, but in many respects it really was. So parks, open spaces and stuff like that.
Yeah,
freedom of
lovely.
movement. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Lovely,
Lots of greenery, lots of nature, parks and open spaces around where we live, and those places would be safe. So we would be able to walk across them at night. We wouldn't feel the need to walk across them with someone else. There wouldn't be any violence, so we'd be free to walk around as we wanted to.
Sounds lovely.
Brilliant. Other people, come on, I know you were talking.
There's a hand over here, I spotted it.
We're building a vision together, and do let me know, whoever's monitoring online, if there's anything you want to feed in.
I think we had maybe 3 areas. So a world where work was purposeful and productive. Much of it isn't at the moment. A world where there was a continual cycle of no waste at all, and a world where either healthcare wasn't in need because we were all healthy, or it was affordable and available.
Great, thank you so much. All really important, and that central one, so important. Moving from the kind of society that we've got that's very linear, where we buy something, we use it, and then we throw it away, to one that's circular, and so there's no waste, everything is being reused and used really well. Great, where are we going?
We're going to online.
So online, we've got making it easier for people to take care of their own health with non-pharmaceutical interventions and more time for access to ongoing medical and social advice for some people face-to-face.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. So this is all linking into the kind of society that we'd want to live in is a healthy one, isn't it? Where we're probably, as was said, we don't even need to be able to access healthcare services because we're living in a way where that isn't needed anymore. What about this table over here? That's
I'm going to thrust the microphone at somebody. Yeah, there we go.
We said about there being like more of a sense of community and sharing things more freely.
Yeah, so that sense of community, moving away from the kind of culture that we're in now, where we're very individualistic and we all have to have our own things, to a society where we share and we're building that sense of community resilience. We know our neighbours, maybe getting back to a little bit of the glimpse that we saw in the first lockdown, when we were actually thinking about those who were around us and taking care of our neighbours. I did a weekly shop for my elderly neighbour, and a few of us formed a little WhatsApp group, so we were looking out for each other. That's kind of a taste, isn't it, of the sort of caring and sharing and collaborative community that we would all love to see and to be a part of. Lovely. Let's take one last comment. Thank you.
Our table kind of talked about connection, so connection to our community and the people around us, connection to the world we live in, including the food we eat and knowing where that comes from, and also about security, so thinking about secure housing for people, and I guess as well about financial inequality, liking to see that gone, and more dogs was also mentioned.
More dogs. And cats. Cats with bells. So they don't catch the birds. More dogs, always in favour. Always in favour of a society with more dogs. And thank you, Louise, that's
Excellent.
Brilliant. And connection. I mean, actually, I think you've summed it up there. I think so much of what we have talked about comes down to connection. Connection with each other, connection with the wider world, connection with ourselves, and for me, speaking from a faith Christian perspective, connection with God, for me, would all be a part of that. Isn't that a wonderful vision, a wonderful dream? And this is why we're here this evening. Not to spend a whole load of time looking at scientific graphs and charts, but to dream about the kind of world that we want to see and the kind of world that climate change is standing in the way of, and that our current way of doing society and of relating to each other and to the natural world is standing in the way of. And it's actually a dream that we find right at the heart of the Christian scriptures. It's a dream about a world in which all people are able to flourish. A dream in which there isn't huge amounts of inequality. A dream in which there is no more injustice. A dream in which there is no more suffering, no more sickness. A dream in which spirituality is right at the center. The biblical language is around God dwelling in the midst of his people. A dream that's a very physical dream. A dream of a flourishing natural world. The Bible has this wonderful picture at the end of a heavenly city, but it's a city that has trees in it and leaves and a river that runs through it. A dream in which all people have enough. There's this other lovely imagery in the prophets, in the Hebrew scriptures, of each person sitting under their vine tree. It's a lovely image. I actually have a vine that's outside the back of my door, and I love sitting under it and pondering on that picture. It's a picture where people have enough. We have what we need. The fruits of our hand, our labour, gives us what we need. But we're not grasping for our neighbour's vine. We're content with what we have got. And wars are no more. The dream in the scriptures is of a society of peace, where the weapons of destruction are changed into ploughs and pruning hooks. A beautiful vision that we see in the scriptures. Welcome. And this is why we are here this evening, to dream together and to think about how can we work towards that kind of a society. It's that sort of dream that has kept me motivated over the years. I've been speaking around issues of environmental care and issues of poverty and increasingly issues around the climate for nearly 30 years, probably about 28 years now. And it's that vision that keeps me going. The organisation that I work for, Tear Fund, we work in around 50 countries, working in some of the poorest communities of the world to help see people lift themselves out of poverty and live transformed lives, reaching their potential. It's that dream that keeps us going with the work that we're doing. And I want you to hold that dream in your mind as we go through this evening. So why does climate change matter? Because we have a dream of a very different society, one that we sometimes get glimpses of today. It's not all bad, but we have a dream of a different society. But the climate crisis is getting in the way of that. And I want to look at that in a bit more depth, thinking about 4 reasons why climate change matters. Firstly, climate change matters for the sake of the world. That dream that we were beginning to think about is one of a flourishing natural world. A beautiful place with green spaces and open spaces, where our houses and our communities are interconnected with the natural world. In the opening pages, the opening verses of the Bible, the kind of language that uses is around teeming. The Bible speaks of a God who created a world that was teeming with life. It's a beautiful word. I love that idea. We see so little of it, sadly, nowadays. I wonder whether you have ever been somewhere where you have seen teeming with life. Maybe a big bird flock, or you may have seen a big shoal of fish, or I don't know what it might have been. The opening chapters of Genesis, of the Bible, speak of a world that is beautiful and diverse and abundant. Speaks of a generous God who creates an amazing world for us to live in, full of incredible creatures, teeming with life. I sometimes think that God could have created, in my way of thinking, a really bland world. He could have created this sort of grey world for us to live in, and we just live off a grey wafer that hangs off a grey tree. That's not what we've got, is it? We've got an amazing, wonderful, colourful, beautiful world. That's part of the dream that I hold on to, of a world that is teeming with life. Sadly, that's not the world that we are currently experiencing. Yes, it is sometimes, but some of these pictures, or all of those pictures, illustrate some of the ways in which we're not seeing that today. We live in a world that now is facing intense environmental problems. I sometimes lecture on a master's course for environmental ethics, and I start off by asking the pupils to get into pairs and to list out all of the environmental problems that they can think of. And then we go round the pairs and take it in turns. And they go round. When we get to the end, we start again and go round and round until we get to the end of the list that everybody's come up with. Sadly, it takes a long time. There are so many issues that we face today. You'll be pleased to know I'm not going to go through that big long list with you this evening, but I have just put up a few illustrative pictures there, and I don't need to speak into all of them. But the climate crisis is devastating our world because it is changing ecosystems and it is breaking the natural cycle of relationship and of connection that we have. One tiny example is our beloved puffin, which is now on the risk of extinction list because the food source that it depends on is dwindling because the oceans, the seas, the temperature of the seas are rising, and so the sand eels that the puffins live on are diminishing. That's just one example, and there are examples all around the world of where the climate crisis is having an impact on different species. We are currently in a situation where a third of all reptiles and amphibian species, so 1 in every 3 reptile and amphibian species is at risk of extinction. 1 in every 4, 25% of mammals are at risk of extinction. We are facing extinction at an unprecedented rate due to our human behaviour. So the climate crisis is having a devastating impact on the natural world. Secondly, for the sake of people living in poverty, as I said, I've been speaking about issues of climate for getting on for 28, it won't be long, before it's 30 years. And I have seen things change over that time in two ways. Firstly, I've seen the language change, and we've moved from talking about global warming to climate change, and now to talking about climate crisis and climate emergency. So our language has changed. But secondly, I know that I have changed in how I talk about it. So for most of my years of communicating, writing and speaking around issues of the climate, I've spoken in terms of predictions and have been using the work of scientists to be saying our climate is changing. If we don't act, this is what we're going to see. So we need to act. And then a few years ago, I was looking at the morning papers. In my role at Tear Fund, I get given a list, a headline of all the papers that get sent through to me. And I was looking through that list, doing my little morning daily scan of the papers. And I realised with a sickening thud that everything I had been talking about in terms of predictions was there right in front of me and had become reality. The headlines were just something else. They were about extreme weather events. They were about increasing incidents of flooding, of sea temperatures rising, of coral reefs bleaching. They were about people losing their homes because of flooding, about people losing their crops. There were headlines around starvation figures increasing, whereas before they have been decreasing. They were headlines about wildfires and droughts. And I just looked at this list and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm no longer talking about heading towards a climate crisis. We are in a climate crisis. We are seeing it. And then I realized, of course, for millions of people around the world, they've been in that crisis for years already, because the climate crisis is impacting first and foremost people living in poverty. At Tear Fund, we hear every day the impact that the changing climate is having on the poorest communities in the world. One of the things that my job involves is overseeing our country strategies. And when they come through, the strategies start by giving a contextual overview of that country. And I'm struck every single time climate change will feature in the analysis of the biggest challenges that are facing that country and the work that we're doing there. Through extreme weather events, through a lack of rain and then too much rain coming which washes away the crops, through wildfires, droughts, rising sea levels. I could give you story after story of where the poorest people in the world are being impacted the most. And it's worth just noting as well the intersectionality, because predominantly it's people who are black and people of colour, and it is women who are suffering the most. And so when we're thinking about the climate crisis, it also intersects with issues of race and gender, and we can't ignore those. And this is a matter of justice, or of injustice, maybe. So an average person in the UK will consume in about 6 days the amount of resources that an average person in Malawi will consume in a year. And yet it's the person in Malawi who is currently suffering the biggest impacts. Environmental problems always impact the poorest people the most. And that is the case in the UK too. It will be the case in Birmingham. Environmental problems always impact the poorest people the most, here and on a global level. So climate change matters for the sake of the poorest people in our world. And then climate matters for our own sake as well, because we are beautifully and wonderfully and intricately connected with the wider natural world. Now, of course, on a very practical level, we need the environment for the resources that it gives us. We need good air to breathe. We need food to eat. We need healthy seas to be able to fish in. We need land to be able to grow off, and so on and so on. So when the natural world is damaged, it damages us because we are part of the same ecosystems that everything else is a part of. So really practically, climate change will and is damaging us. But it damages us on a deeper level too, because we have been designed, in my faith language, we've been created to have a connection with the wider natural world. And we need the environment, we need nature for our own sense of well-being as well, and for our positive mental health. Didn't we find that so much during the pandemic, when we had our daily walks and we got outside and we heard the birds and we breathed the air and noticed that the air was clearer because there weren't so many cars, and so many of us rediscovered the mental health well-being of being outside and of connecting with nature. From a biblical perspective, we've got it right there. So again, in those opening chapters of the Bible, we are created as Adam. And Adam is a play on words. It's like a pun by the Hebrew writer, because the Hebrew for ground is Adamah. And we are Adam from the Adamah. We are earth creatures, literally. We are earthy ones. We have been created from the dust, from the soil. We're not floaty angelic beings existing up here with nothing to do with the physical world. We are earth creatures. Did you know that there are microbes in the soil that when they come into contact with your skin, it releases happy hormones inside of us? There is something very physically positive about getting your hands dirty and doing some gardening. We were created to be gardeners before anything else. And I love the fact that science is kind of catching up with what we have intuitively known for so long, that getting outside, gardening, bird watching, whatever it is we like doing, getting outside is good for us. So I want to encourage you, get outside, get your hands dirty, discover the positive benefits of nature connection. There are all sorts of studies that have been done with school children, with hospital with hospital patients, with prison inmates, that show the positive benefits of getting outside for recovery from operations, for swifter recovery, for good behaviour and so on. Let's get outside and connect with the natural world for our own sake. And so climate change matters, because if the wider world is damaged, then we too are damaged. There's a writer called Richard Louv who has coined the phrase nature deficit disorder. And I think that's such a good way of describing it. So many of us suffer from nature deficit disorder because we don't get outside. So there's a challenge to get outside and get your hands dirty. And then finally, for God's sake. And I know not all of us here are coming from a faith perspective, and not all of us here are coming from a Christian perspective. But I just want to talk for a moment about how my Christian faith weaves into the things that we've been talking about. Because for me, climate change matters fundamentally because responding to the issues of climate change is for me a part of my faith. And so it matters for God's sake. Why? Because God made this world and God loves it. Now, this isn't about a debate around creationism or evolutionism or whatever. However we believe the world came into existence, I believe that God was the originator and the source. And God loves this world. Genesis 1:31 tells us that God looked at all that God had made and said, "It is very good." What else do we need to know about what God thinks of this world? Some of us may have come from faith traditions and maybe Christian traditions that have taught that there's something slightly inferior about this world, that our destiny is on a floaty heaven somewhere, and really what we want to do is escape from this world as quickly as possible because this world is a bit inferior. That's not what we get in the scriptures. The scriptures tell us that matter matters to God. God is the creator of this world. It comes from God's very breath. God speaks and the world comes into being. What an amazingly positive affirmation of material existence, of physical existence. And then all through the scriptures, we get a wonderful picture of God's continual care and love and involvement with this creation. To the extent that we are told in the New Testament that this world was made by Jesus and for Jesus and through Jesus. There are some beautiful affirmations of physical existence that we have in the scriptures. And for me, as a follower of Jesus, and as, to put it in Christian language, as a disciple, it's a really important part of worshipping Jesus, the Lord of creation, that I want to look after what is so precious to God. And I can't understand how anybody who worships the Lord of all creation could then want to live in a way that damages that which is so precious to God. So God made this world and loves it. And he has created us to take care of it. We've been placed in the garden as the earth creatures to tend it and till it, to take care of it. We have a role as God's image bearers, as God's representatives, to take care of the rest of what he has made. But we know that it's gone wrong because of us, and actually the scriptures speak into that as well. And particularly in the Old Testament prophetic literature, you see a real link between God, the people, and the land. So where the people are, what to use Christian language or biblical language, where they're righteous, how do you know that? Not by whether they're following the Sabbath or doing the religious things well. You know that righteousness is about taking care of other people and practicing social justice. And when people do that, then all goes well in the land and there is environmental flourishing. And we see in the scriptures when the reverse happens as well. So it's gone wrong because of us. But the good news is that God has a plan and a future for his created world. And we are called to be a part of that. That vision that we started off with, that dream that we began to dream about together, that is the vision of the future that the Bible points towards. And we are called to take our part and to play our part in working towards that future. So climate change matters for God's sake and for our sakes, for the sake of people living in poverty and for the sake of the wider natural world. So where does that leave us then? Let's think back to that vision that we had of a flourishing world with no poverty, wonderful community, lots of green spaces. And then think back to some of those slides. That's not where we are now, is it, sadly? We've got a long way to go. There's a big gap between where we are now and the vision that we have. What do we do with that gap? How do we begin to move towards it? Where do we go from here? And I believe that our role, for me, my role as a Christian, and for all of us, whether you have a faith or not, is to stand in the gap. And we do that by giving, acting, and praying. I start with giving because I think it's really important what we do with our money. For those of us who are Christians, you might be interested to know, you may know already, that Jesus talked about money more than anything else in the Gospels apart from the kingdom of God. What we do with our money is important. And for all faith traditions, what we do with our money is important. Being generous and giving to others, using our money well. So let us bless others with what we have been blessed with. Let's be giving our money to other people, to organisations that are working in these areas. Let's use our money well to support the things that we're thinking about this evening. So let's give. And while we're on the topic of money, just to say it's not only about what we do with the money that we give, but it's also about what we do with the money that we keep. Thinking about our investments, the bank that we use. If we have a pension or if we have a mortgage, do we know what's happening with that money? So think also about the money that you keep in some way and make sure that that is going towards good ends and is being invested ethically. So we can give. Secondly, we can act. And we can act in two ways. We can act firstly by taking action in our own lives, thinking about our individual lifestyle, thinking back to the amount that we consume in 6 days, as opposed to a person in Malawi consuming in a year. How can we take steps to consume less and to consume in ways that are more careful and more gentle on this earth? There are so many different things that we could touch on. This is a whole talk in itself, and I've just put up some areas there to be thinking about: our food, our travel, our energy, our waste, particularly plastic. And we touched on quite a lot of, maybe all of that actually, when we were thinking about our vision. It doesn't cover everything. We can think about our clothes and our technology. There's lots of other things as well. But those are some areas to think about. So we can take action through the way that we live and the choices, the everyday, and then sometimes the big choices that we make. And we can take action through calling on governments and businesses to be putting into place policies and practices that work in favour of the world's poor and in favour of the wider natural world. So it's really important that we do those everyday individual things. But the big change is going to happen through governments and businesses putting into place the big things that will lead to systemic change. And we all have a role in standing up and calling on our governments and our businesses to act. One thing at Tear Fund we've just launched a new campaign called Time to Deliver, which is calling on the government to deliver on its promises around climate finance that it promised back in 2009 and still hasn't delivered on. Would love you to add your name to our campaign, because that will then be going to the government. If you want to just take a picture or jot down those notes or go straight online and fill it in. It's called Time to Deliver, and it's really important that the government is delivering around climate finance. So we can give and we can act, thinking about our lifestyles and really importantly, thinking about those big systemic changes that are needed. Before I get onto the final point, I want to pause and go back to this area. And I want to give you some time on your tables to be thinking that through. I would love you to share what things recently, and you can make recently however long you want, what things recently have you done in these areas, or maybe in other things, to live a bit more lightly on this earth and to be more environmentally conscious? What things have you done? One or two things. And as you listen to people on your table, then share, what thing could you do coming away from here? What might you do differently? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes or so in your tables to think about that. And for those of you who are watching online, would love to hear from you as well. Do put in your comments, would love to hear the kind of things you've been doing and then what you would like to do differently. So over to you for a little bit. Lovely. Do you want to start to look this way? Thank you. It's great hearing your discussion and again getting little snippets of the kind of things you've been talking about. Would love to hear and to share with the rest of us. What kind of things have you been doing? Go on, Liz, you can run around.
I'm looking for hands. Over there.
Thanks.
The first thing I'm prepared to say is that I'm embarrassed because I've done desperately little in each of those 4 areas. The second thing, coming from discussion around here, is that where we have made moves in those areas, it's not really been for climate change reasons. It's been pure economy and personal and family economy that's pushed us in those sorts of directions. It's embarrassing to actually have to say so, but to a substantial extent, we have tended to ignore climate change. And part of the problem is that we react to government stimuli, we react to international stimuli. And we desperately need, for climate change, governments and multi-country activities to help prod us in that direction.
Yeah, thank you. You touched on some brilliant points there, and thank you ever so much for your honesty. And it's great where the environment and your budget does actually come together and where that helps and they work together, and such an important point that so often what we can and can't do is determined by government policy, and we need government to make it easy for us to do the right thing and to make it hard for us to do the damaging thing. So yeah, great, thank you.
Lovely.
Cool. I think on this table there were perhaps skepticism is not the right word. Perhaps it was more of a question on how much impact can we individually make on a day-to-day by turning off the lights and using compost bins and everything else. How much are we actually doing to make a dent on the climate? When a lot of the impact is from, I think as already been said, is from sort of large organizations, oil and gas wars, etc., etc. So that was where some of the questions were. And we also talked about, if we're trying to, for example, go vegetarian or, do something else to, perhaps use less meat, it's trying to get enough information to understand where those things that go into the products we're getting, how far away are they actually coming from, and are we actually, in trying to do good, are we actually, making things a bit worse and increasing our footprint?
Yeah, great, thank you. Knowledge is so important because these issues are really, really complex and complicated. And so getting a bit of knowledge to help us understand and to be able to help us answer some of those questions is really key. And in a bit, I'll tell you about some of the resources that I've brought that might help you with that. And another place you can go to that's really helpful is something called Ethical Consumer, which produces a hard copy magazine, but has also got really good online stuff as well. So the Ethical Consumer is a great place to look into some of those things. And really good questions around the impact of us doing all of these little things. And you're right, which is why I pair it up with the need to be doing the advocacy and campaigning work as well. It's got to go hand in hand, but it does have to go hand in hand because actually all those little things that we do are saying to our government and to our businesses that this is how we want to live. And so, not so often, always, well, not always, sorry, I'm going to get myself into a nuanced mess as I try and say this, so forget that. Governments and businesses, by and large, respond to what they think their citizens and their consumers want. So if we try and push a company to go in a particular direction, they might say, yeah, but all the consumers want us to do it cheaply in this way or to do it filled with plastic or what have you. So our little actions show governments and show businesses that we want things to happen differently. And also, I would say, alongside those big things, a lot of the mess of our world is made up of all of our little individual negative actions, isn't it? And so, therefore, a lot of the good of this world could be made up of lots of our individual little actions for the good as well. So it does add up. Thank you.
I've shuffled over here because this gentleman was waving at me.
Shall we hear some online stuff as well?
Shall we?
Yeah,
Yes. One more here and then.
Come here and then we'll go online.
We were talking about like kind of make, do, amend, and like I think that was a good way to, and consumerism in itself, like what you were talking about, and like we talked about the common. I can't even say that word. We talked about the big economy, whatever the word is, in itself as well, like how it has made a massive difference in budgeting and what you're waiting. And we also talked about the gas and not gas. We talked about gas and waste, and like especially like with what's happened with Russia when the price is going up and everything. And we also were talking about how when people were giving away things to Ukraine, that it made them maybe rethink about their individual lives as well, and how it can make a difference, like in like fast fashion or other things in itself, like individual, which does make a difference, not on the long term, even if you don't think it makes a difference.
Yeah, thank you. So really thinking about our consumer habits and how quickly and easily we might buy something new. And I think my basic mantra around that would be consume less, consume well, and make it last. And if we hold those things together, I think that will get us quite a long way. What have we got online?
Online, yeah. We have Peter telling us that they just buy the food they know they're going to use in their house, and they try not to waste, so bread gets frozen, etc. And they're finding that's helpful for their budget as well.
Yeah, definitely. Great.
Steve is stopping making unnecessary car journeys and cycling and walking instead.
Fabulous.
Peter's very involved. They've turned down the heating by 1 degree because of the cost at the moment.
Yep.
What have we got? Getting comfortable shoes so that you can walk more.
Oh, there we go. There's a challenge.
Instead of reading the meters every couple of years, Karen is making sure she reads them every month, and it's motivating her to switch off appliances and turn the thermostat down.
Brilliant, getting meter obsessed.
Yeah, keeping an eye on that. And reducing meat intake has been talked about a bit as well.
Thank you, that's great, that's great. Any other final things you would like to tell us about? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we've mentioned about consumerism and individual actions on the things. I think that's really important. I think one thing that's not been mentioned is I think group action and campaign as general, and I've not mentioned it. So, I mean, I have my part is to organise climate strikes. So Youth Struggle Climate in Birmingham. I'm one of the leading organisers, if you like. So I think although individual action is very important, it sort of puts the blame on individuals, like you are doing it on your own, and the blame is on you, and you must act on it. I think a lot of the times it's big businesses and corporations doing a lot of the stuff that's not, completely reducible by individual action. So I think we need to sort of organise as a group or as a campaign group or whatnot, and then I think that's more important. So not more, but equal as important as individual actions.
It's got to go hand in hand, hasn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Louise. I'll leave it there. Lovely. Which is why I come back again to that slide, which has just got one example on it, but absolutely. And to say, we've heard it from the discussion at the back, and we heard it from over here too. The big systemic changes have got to happen. Our lifestyle is important, but exactly as you've said, this is not about putting the blame on all of us. We need our government and our businesses to act. So do get involved. Get involved in the Birmingham climate strikes. Get involved in XR if that's the kind of thing that you want to do. Get out on the streets. Talk to your MP. Invite your MP to your church or to your university campus. Engage. Get involved in politics yourself. Be involved in business. Be an engineer who's making a difference, etc. There is so much that we can do. I want to finish with the final point of give, act, and pray. And I'm finishing with prayer because for me, as a person of faith, prayer undergirds everything that I do. And I can be active up to my eyeballs, which I am. But I need to accompany it with rhythms of prayer because they help to sustain me. And they help to sustain the many years of activism that I have been engaged with. And also because I believe that prayer works. And I believe that prayer makes a difference. And I believe that when we pray, God acts. And when we look at the absolute bloody mess that we have got in our world today, we need God to act. The scriptures tell us that when God's people repent, when they turn from their wicked ways, when they get on their knees and repent, God will hear, and he will heal their land. And that is what we need to see. So I would love you to join us and to join thousands of people around the country who are actively praying for the climate and praying to see change alongside taking action in the ways that we have talked about. Great to see some of you taking pictures of that. Sign up, get involved. You get really practical things that you can pray about to help you pray effectively. Sometimes it can be so hard to know what to pray for, can't it? And this will help you with that. Let me finish by telling you about the resources that I've brought that are over on the table over there. A few books that I've written, just so you know, I don't get any of the money for this. It all goes to Tear Fund. So one book is called Just Living, Faith and Community in an Age of Consumerism. And this is really asking the question, how as people of faith can we live well in our consumer society? We've touched all through this evening on the problems that consumerism is giving us. How can we live well as Christians or as people of faith in our consumer society? And Just Living really is an exploration of that, gives you a chance to think that through. If you want something, and it's got lots of practical things in it as well, but if you want something that is just straightforwardly practical, and this picks up on the discussion at the back about getting some knowledge and understanding so that we're not doing more damage by the good that we're trying to do. L is for lifestyle. Christian living that doesn't cost the earth will give you that practical stuff. So it goes through the alphabet, takes an issue for each letter. Every chapter is very short. Sometimes I call it a toilet book. You could put it in the toilet, and depending on the length of a sitting, you might get through a chapter. I don't know. You could tell me later, or maybe not. I don't need to know. And each chapter finishes with 2 or 3 very clear action points, so you can go away and after you've been to the toilet and do something active. So this will help you take action.
Let's see if I can finish the chapter now, shall we?
Okay. You don't. The toilets are over there if you want to. If you want to put into practice. Saying Yes to Life was the Archbishop of Canterbury's Lent book. And it's an exploration of Genesis 1 and the 6 days, I'm going to put that in inverted commas, the 6 days of creation. Each chapter looks at one of those days and explores what was created, so whether it's sky or vegetation and land, living creatures, and looks at the scriptures, at where those things come in through the scriptures, and then looks at it scientifically and at what those issues are today and at how we can get involved. I never really know how to explain this well, but I would say it's my richest book. So if you want something that you want to really get into and read, it gives you lots more of the biblical stuff that I only really began to touch on. If you want something to really get into, then I would recommend that. And then the final book that I haven't got, because I've been other places before coming here and I'm afraid I've sold out of, is Planet Protectors. And that is for primary school aged kids. It was co-written with Paul Carenza, who's a comedian and a BBC scriptwriter, wrote the script for Miranda and other things. Is absolutely brilliant. And I think it's my favourite book, and I haven't got it here, so I'm really sorry. But it's fun and it's quirky and it's challenging and it's funny. So if you've got kids or nieces or nephews or you're a teacher or grandkids, it's really easily available online, so you can get that. So there are copies of the others of those books over there. Not that many, because I'm now getting to the end of my stock, so do get over there quickly if you would like to have a look at any of them. I'm going to pause and draw breath. Why does climate change matter? Well, I hope you know now. What do we do about it? We stand in the gap. We take responsibility. We give and we act and we pray. Thank you.
Amazing. If you would like to come and join me. Thank you so much for that. It's been great, and it's lovely to be so interactive as well. And we continue that theme with some Q&A. So thank you for texting in your questions. You can continue to do that. I'm going to tell you we have plenty of questions, though. So if you really have a question, send it about 5 times so we know how important it is. The one that's come up quite frequently is the issue of how much change we can realistically make. So there's a lot of doom and gloom around climate change. This person particularly mentions the Copenhagen Consensus and their assessment of the Paris Agreement. So I don't know whether you want to go into those specifically, but the overall question is really, can we realistically do anything?
Thank you, and that's a really good question. The answer is yes. So without going into all of the detail, what is being talked about when people say Paris or Copenhagen is the annual climate change meetings that happen every year. I don't need to say that. So you might remember we had one in Glasgow towards the end of last year, and that was called COP26. That's the Conference of the Parties. So that's the governments of our world, most of them, coming together, and it was called COP26 because it was the 26th meeting. And so there have been meetings every year going back for 26 years. And a couple of the really historic ones were Copenhagen, where we were looking for some really good deals and they didn't happen. And the environmental climate change community went away absolutely devastated. And then the Paris Agreement was the key one where almost all of the governments of the world came together and made a promise, made a commitment to work towards keeping levels of temperature rise, of climate rise, to within 2 degrees and preferably within 1.5. So Paris was 6 years ago. Coming out from Paris was the agreement that 5 years on from Paris, all countries would come together again and bring their plans for how they would keep, for what they would do and how they would keep below 1.5. And 5 years on was Glasgow, COP26, which then, because of the pandemic, became 6 years on. So Glasgow was a really important time for countries to come and bring their plans, put them on the table, and see how they added up. There's lots of detail. I could go into that on that. I won't, except to say, if you take all of the promises that have been made, if you take them all, they will keep us to below 1.5 degrees. The key, of course, is whether those promises are going to be delivered. And it won't surprise you to hear our governments don't have a good track record in that. So there is hope, and it is all still to play for if we can get our governments to keep those promises. And that is why, again, we keep coming back to this. We have got such a role to be calling on our government and wider governments to keep to their promises and to take significant action. So we must be getting involved in campaigning in the different things that we've been hearing about this evening. We can still make a difference. Whether we will, we don't know. I'm not a fortune teller, but we can, and it is up to us.
Amazing. Continuing that theme of how much difference we can make, what about that specifically in the field of species decline? Can we really reverse the decline that we've seen in a lot of species?
Again, I don't know. There is so much that needs to happen for that to take place. And if I'm really honest, in the very here and now, I don't have a lot of hope that we can, because I don't see us moving in the right direction. Our species decline isn't only because of climate change, it's also in large part due to how we're using the land, misusing our land and misusing the seas through overfishing. So there are big things that need to take place and big changes that need to take place. Whether we can change that, again, I honestly don't know. But we all have a part to play, both in thinking about the impact that our own actions have, and in calling, again, on governments and businesses to be doing the right thing. So, as a tiny example, every time we choose to buy something that's organic rather than non-organic, we will be taking a little step towards supporting a farming system that takes care of the world and that encourages more insects and wildlife. It's a little thing we can do. Yes, it costs a bit more, and it may be that we're not in a place where we can switch to everything being organic, and that's fine. I would just say do what we can. But even if you just switched one thing to organic when you didn't do that before, that would be you taking one little action to support a positive practice that will help biodiversity. If you eat fish, look out for the Marine Stewardship Council logo. You've probably never noticed it, and now, when you look at your fish, you will. It's a kind of oblong blue fish tick thing that you will now see if you're buying produce that has it on. That is a certification scheme that's saying that the fish that you're buying, or the seafood, if it's wild, is coming from well-managed stock. So you choosing to buy your fish or your seafood from something that has that tick on it, again, is you making a tiny little choice to say, yes, I want to support a system that is taking care of our seas and our oceans. If you buy something that doesn't have that tick on it, then you are, in a tiny way, partly responsible for the destruction that we're seeing. So we all have those choices that we can make, as well as, again, those big systemic things we need to call on.
Sure. If I can add to that, which feels a little cheeky because we are here to listen to you, Ruth. I am a translator in my day job, and I work on market research projects a lot of the time. Now, obviously, I can't tell you very much at all about the content of those because it's proprietary, but it is notable that companies are looking at our habits and they want to know what we are doing so that they can learn to cater to that in order to make profit. So if we have habits that they can cater to, that they can make profit off, that are environmentally friendly, it does help, and they are looking at specifically environmental habits at the moment. So my iPad screen's gone to sleep now. I've taken that short detour. 1 second. All right. Yes, we've talked a lot about activism and holding government to account. How do we do that? Should we be writing to our MPs, or should we be joining Extinction Rebellion? What kinds of things should we be doing?
I think there's a whole range of things that we can do. So there are your classic, well-tried and tested campaign things of writing to your MP. I would really, whatever you do, I would encourage you to join with others, because joining your voice to other people's makes it much more powerful than being a lone campaigner on your own. So get involved in the things that Tear Fund is doing and other organisations, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, Christian Aid. You've got great organisations out there. Get involved in what they're doing and join your voice to others. So we can do that in the classic way of signing an e-petition, sending an email to your MP, sending a postcard, whatever it might be. If you're part of a wider community, like a church or a university, a student union or something like that, I'd really encourage you to invite your MP in to talk to them, so you're having that engagement as well and showing your MP and your local councils that these are things that are important to you. But I would also personally say that for some of us, we need to be out on the streets doing the more civil disruption stuff. And I know that it is contentious and I know that it upsets people, but I believe that it has a place in the toolkit of bringing about change. And when you look at social movements and you look at what has brought about change in history, civil disruption is very often a part of that. And from a faith perspective, the Christian faith has a long history in radical dissent and a long history in civil disruption, whether it's the civil rights movement or the origin of the Quakers, the Salvation Army. You look at some of the things they did that got them in prison right in their early days, going right back into the scriptures, looking at some of the crazy actions of Jeremiah or of Ezekiel. Remember, the first Christians themselves were a radical minority who often ended up in prison. Sometimes we think about Paul's words in his letter to the Romans that is around obeying authorities. I think there's a lot in that, but remember, Paul himself was in prison when he wrote that, so that's got to speak for something. So I'm not saying carte blanche, any form of civil disruption is acceptable. I think we need wisdom, I think we need discernment, but I do think that it has a place in the whole armoury, the whole toolkit of bringing about change.
Lovely, thank you. We talked about climate change hitting the poorest hardest. Why does that happen? And could you give us an example or two of how that works?
Oh, why does it happen? Do you know, I don't know how to start to answer that question. So let me give a couple of examples. And actually, interestingly, over dinner, we were talking about this, weren't we? And I was talking about a man called Daniel, who I went to visit in the central area of Tanzania, which is the poorest area, the Manyoni district. And I was out travelling with a friend, and I'd gone to do some speaking with the diocese there. And the friend I was with knew this chap and wanted to go and visit him. So he was his shamba, his homestead, it's about 12 acres, I think, is on the floor of I said the Serengeti earlier, the floor of the Rift Valley was what I meant to say. So we had a wonderful day where we went and spent a day with Daniel on the floor of the Rift Valley with his wife and his little child, his little daughter, and he wanted to show us all the amazing work that he was doing. He was rearing pigs, he was growing all sorts of crops, he had plans for planting more papaya trees to sell to market. He was doing all sorts of things, and he got out his guitar, we sang songs together. It was idyllic in many ways, sitting underneath his mango tree. And yet, as we walked around and he showed us proudly, I could see that the land was dying. He had planted a field of chili plants. They were just withering. I used to keep pigs. His piglets, when he told me how old they were, I could see that they weren't growing properly. His papaya wasn't the size that it should be. The cashew, we broke into some of his cashew pods, and they were tiny. They weren't filling out. His land was dying, and it was such an illustration to me of the climate crisis. He was trying so hard, and yet he couldn't he couldn't do what he wanted to do because he wasn't getting the rains. And when the rains did come, they came so hard that they washed away all the crops that he had tried to plant. So he was trying to dig by hand a well that would then capture the rain when it did come. But it was really stark to me that the way he was suffering the impact of climate change. And then one other story from a colleague of mine at Tear Fund who was telling me about a trip that he did to Bangladesh, which you may know is a very low-lying area. And he went to visit a woman with her family, and they were sitting in their kitchen with the plastic chairs and table. And as they were talking, the sea was coming in and was lapping around them and came up to their knees. And they were sitting there talking with the sea up to their knees. And she had been, over the years, as the sea level was rising, she had a few times had to move her whole house and move back a few, whatever, meters or something. But she'd now got to the point, I don't remember what, something was behind her.
I believe it was shrimp farms. I think you've written about it.
I was thinking it was probably a shrimp farm, yeah, but I didn't know that for sure. Probably a prawn farm. Whatever it was, she couldn't move back any further, so she was now stuck with the water coming into her home. That, again, is another illustration of climate change. Why is it happening? Because the temperatures are rising unevenly around the world, and it's congregating particularly in the areas where those countries are poorest. And then, of course, because they're poorest, they don't have the financial means and the resilience to be able to adapt or change.
That's great. Thank you. Let's thank Ruth now, and then we'll move on from there. I have a couple of bits to talk to you about, but I'm hoping that I might fit in one bonus question at the end, if we're efficient. So firstly, we have a QR code that's about to appear on screen. If you are on YouTube, you will find a link right at the top of the video description. If you go on there, it will take you to a list of buttons. The top one is a feedback form. So if you're in the room, I'd really love it if you would do this right now. It's a 2 to 3 minute questionnaire. There's a feedback form, and basically we're here for the audience. That's why we put these events on. We're trying to facilitate things that are interesting and that you want to learn about. So we want to know how well we're doing at that. That's really, really important for us. So I'm going to keep chatting a little bit while you do that. I'll try and take it gently because I know that we're concentrating on a couple of things at once. One other thing that you can do, also on the QR code if you choose to, or you can go to our website, scienceandfaith.co.uk, is book the next event. Now that's in just 3 weeks. So you need to be getting that date in your diary if you're interested. There are flyers on the tables. We're hosting Sharon Dirricks to talk about Who Am I Just My Brain? And we do have a short video of her introducing that topic that should appear any moment. Any moment.
My name is Sharon Dirricks and I'm a speaker, author and adjunct lecturer at the Oxford Centre for Christian Apologetics. And I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be speaking at some events in Birmingham on Wednesday the 15th of June. I'm going to be looking at the topic of neuroscience and human identity, and specifically the question, who am I? Am I just my brain? There are all kinds of answers and descriptions given in culture today about what a human being is. And one of those is that we are our brains. Everything we do, think, and say is driven by the neurons in our head. Well, is this true? Is this the best way of thinking about a human being? Or are there better ways of describing human beings? And I'm going to be looking at this topic and unpacking it in all kinds of ways on the 15th of June. These events are open to anyone that is interested, whatever your beliefs may be, whether you would describe yourself as a person of faith or not. You will be so welcome to join us. And I hope that you can, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Lovely. Thank you to Digital Sharon there. You can use the same discount code. If you had a discount code, you can use the same discount code to book your ticket for that event. So do enjoy that discount. Right, now I'm trying to get back into this again. Got time. Got 1 minute for a bonus question. Let's see if we can do this. The 4 areas that you encouraged us to focus on earlier to find ways that we can be greener: travel, energy, waste, and food. What are you currently doing in those areas?
Oh, good question. Always trying to find more to do. So I've done quite a lot in most of those areas. So then it becomes harder to find more to do. One thing I would say is that we have a holiday in the Alps this year, which
Very nice.
it's a family reunion, and we are going by train rather than flying.
That's a long journey, yeah.
Yeah, and actually really excited about that. And it's very doable. You know, we can get there in a day from St Pancras, so it's very doable. So
Nice.
that's quite an exciting thing.
Yeah.
And I have also just done, last week, Greenpeace did something called the Big Plastic Count. I don't know if any of you saw that. So I joined in that, where I kept a record of any plastic that I threw away or recycled, and they're going to use that to kind of tally up what the big count is from everybody. I think 175,000 people did it. And they're going to use that as part of their lobbying to the government and to businesses around plastic. So I did that too.
Amazing. Do you have anything on food that's recent to you? Not recent.
Specifically. Food is something I've been working on for a long time, so probably not something new that I've done, I don't think.
Fair enough. I have noticed you eating a lot of hummus and vegetarian food over the last couple of days, so I think that's definitely there. We can vouch for it. Thank you so much, Ruth. Ruth will be around for the next few minutes. We've also got a little chalkboard up here. We would love to hear some of your ideas. Sharing ideas about what we can all do helps spur the rest of us to have that thought as well, wonder whether we can do that. So if you have a response to climate change to add to our board, please do that. It would be really good to hear from you. And yeah, chat to us. If you are on the stream, chat to Stu, who's on the stream. That would be great. And we hope to see you either in person or on the stream for our next event. Thank you for being here. And thank you to Ruth especially.